If you find yourself with a camera in your hand and you want to learn how to use it, please subscribe to this channel, like the videos, comment down below what you would like to learn more about. Hi Photos subscribers. Today we are talking about contrast. How do I get better contrast? How do I get harsh contrast? My assumption is with these questions is that your contrast is fairly flat. So there aren't a lot of shadows, there aren't a lot of details, you don't really see a lot of edge in your photographs. And it's not uncommon for starting out. Even if you're experienced and you just don't know what's going wrong and how to get better edge detail, the clue that a lot of photographers are probably going to give you is change up your lighting. Great, I would, except I can't move the sun except for waiting for 5 or 10 minutes. That was often my reply because I was shooting with natural light. The important aspect of it is look into other ways of using the light you have to bounce or reflect light back into your subject or the edges of your subject in different ways. You can, well, I'm not going to say you can. I'm going to say you have noticed the difference in lighting from this video and previous videos. I was shooting outside. I had direct light most of the time, and you saw a brick background. Then you saw me switch to an indoor studio, and now you see that I have different lighting, more intense lighting on me now. That is a great observation because I do have different and new light on me now. You see a little bit of a window decoration shadow across me. I kind of like that moody kind of lighting. It also creates leading lines to me, so that's kind of cool. The other side is I'm not using studio video lights. I'm using reflectors. And you're going to wiggle this reflector here. You can see that change on me, and that very odd change of lighting with that reflector there. So lighting is very key to contrast. So they're not wrong when they tell you to change up your lighting, although it can be hard to be creative in changing it up when you actually do need to. The other part of it is your settings need to be so much different than what you currently have. If you're not shooting in manual mode, my personal preference is to shoot in manual mode. I'm not going to say you have to though, because really what you want to control when you're shooting and having more intense light, we'll get to changing up your lighting here in a minute, but I want to get past that initial knee-jerk, oh, lighting is your issue kind of response, and share with you how to get your camera ready so that when you have that lighting set up, your camera is ready to get it. So adjust your ISO down to 100. I believe as we've gone over the mode shooting settings, if you shoot in program mode, it should allow you to adjust your ISO and your camera will adjust most everything else except for perhaps shutter speed. I don't recall. But so your camera in program mode, if you find a dial on your camera, whether it's mirrorless point and shoot or if you have direct lens, digital lens, single lens reflector, which is what they call a DSLR. Single lens reflector sounds right, but the point is, in program mode for Canons, as I recall, and it stands to reason it would be the same for Nikon, Sony, Panasonic, you're going to find that they allow you in that program mode to adjust to shoot ISO at your standard, and it adjusts most everything else. The aspect to that, it allows you the control of how sensitive your sensor is to light. So the less sensitive it is, the more it allows blacks to remain. Like the shadows won't be filled in so much. It'll give you greater contrast because you'll have the unlit areas that will remain unlit longer. So when you actuate your shutter, it will take a little longer for your subject to remain lit, or the shadows in their face, such as mine. You can see there's some pretty dark shadows if I didn't have a reflector over here, and even still, because I turn my head away from the sun, there's some dark shadows here. But if I turn towards the sun, that changes the lighting greatly. So another part of what the photographers are saying when they say change up your lighting is perhaps you ask your model to turn not into the sun, that would be murder, but more in line with the sun so that there's less shadow, so that when you reflect something back into their face, it almost helps looking into the sun, because they have something that's kind of helping their eyes balance out the light that it's receiving. So ISO 100, that's almost non-negotiable. Shutter speed, I would suggest to have your shutter speed, if I'm recalling correctly, that should be the other option that lets you control. But if program mode only lets you control ISO, then do your best to turn your exposure level down so that your shutter speed stays open in a shorter amount of time. So in other words, you're still affecting the shutter speed, it's just that your exposure is down more, and your image will not be as exposed. I wouldn't suggest pushing it a lot. Your meter should be divided into thirds, which are stops, and if you push it to one full stop, then that's going to make it pretty dark. Very quickly then, once you have your shutter speed and your ISO set pretty low, then you can make sure that your camera is going to affect a mid or high aperture, so that it's got a fairly good shutter speed, so it's not making the shutter speed too low and it's not making the shutter speed too fast, but it's also getting a mid-range of aperture exposure, so that your lens diaphragm is not shrinking down too much, creating too much of a clear background if you don't want your background to be in focus, and allow enough light in to be exposed properly without adding too much contrast. Because if you have your black point in your photograph too great, then it can make everything kind of look strange or odd. So that's one reason I encourage you to shoot in manual mode, is you'll be able to control all three aspects of your sensor and the lens operation, so that you're not too hindered in those respects. But as for lighting, you're going to need intense lighting. If your lighting, if you have light set up that makes everything flat, as some people call it, or it makes it so even that you get shadows that there appears to be shadow, but it's just probably more of the area in your photograph that really is properly exposed, to where there is no definition of shape, then intensify one of your lights, or add a light if you can. If you're shooting in a studio, add a light that is direct lighting so that you get that harsh shadow. That's part of what you're looking for with a higher contrast, something that's not that completely flat. It looks like the person you're imaging is a piece of paper. So that really is kind of hard to do. People actually do seek to have a very, very soft lighting effect so that it appears like there are no shadows, but that's achieved in a different way as well. So something which you expect high contrast is lit very evenly and very flat, and it has an appeal all of its own. That's very specific and unique lighting, and it takes a little while to learn and to be able to properly execute. But that's the major thing with high contrast, or a better or a greater contrast, is direct lighting, something that's not modified, something that gives you that very harsh. You can see here, sitting in the sunlight, for me, it's very harsh around my eye, and with that harshness, there's great contrast. You can see the curvature of my cheek here, you can see the outline of my nose, and you can see where the ridge of my nose is. It's a lighting style all of its own. I prefer the moodier aspect of it, so I don't like the highlight blowouts of this style of lighting, but I do like the lighting mood of it. So that's creating a better contrast with lighting. And really, yes, it has a lot to do with that high intensity light, But that's not the only key. If your camera isn't set up to capture it, then it's going to overexpose or wash out, and it's not going to look right. So make sure that you have your camera set up so that when you have that right light intensity, you get it captured and you get it looking just like you're wanting it. Thank you so much for watching. If this content has added value to your photography, please like and leave a comment down below letting us know what you liked about it and what you would like to see more of for future content, and subscribe. Thank you so much. God bless.